Hello, I'm Mia. The talk of ticket offices and closing and taking guards off trains has reminded me of a train guard who looked out for me on a train journey I made when I was 18. And it made me think of how he made my journey easier. And I feel people need to understand the value of rail staff. So I'd like to launch an appeal to see if I can find the train guard who helped me nearly 22 years ago and thank him personally for his help that morning as I made a journey I needed to make under complex circumstances. At Durham Station on Monday, the 18th of March 2002, I boarded the 507 GNER train to London King's Cross. The ticket office wasn't open yet, and the ticket machine didn't have my destination as an option. On the train, I asked the guard about getting a ticket to Woking, and he talked me through my options. He said it would be cheaper if I waited until later in the morning, or if I went via Birmingham. But as I was already on the London train, I had enough money, uh, and so I decided to stay on the train as I was anxious to get to my relative's house. I sensed the guard was concerned about me, a young girl travelling alone in the early hours who was about to cross London at the height of the Monday morning rush hour. My ticket cost £88 and was handwritten on a slip. I paid for the ticket in cash. I'm now bringing up the a photograph of the ticket as it looks very rare and someone might recognize the handwriting. The guard struck a balance many people would struggle to get right. He didn't interfere or judge or quiz me, and yet at the same time, I felt he really looked out for me. He showed he cared about my welfare, and he did what he could to make my journey that bit easier. I remember his name was Sean. He spelled Sean. He had dark hair. I'd guess his age is late 20s, early 30s, meaning that now he'll be late 40s, early 50s. He had a Geordie accent, and I remember he used the term sweetheart a lot. I'll share some details of me that might jog his memory. I had long dark hair and wore a dark blue coat and dark blue jeans. And the picture that on the thumbnail is a picture of me taken a few years after I made my trip. Um, I had a grey flight bag and a very worn, very full Iceland carrier bag, which I kept some of my luggage in. I had my luggage on the empty seat next to me. Um, I'd say between York and Doncaster, I went to the buffet car to find a phone to ring my parents. I tried to make a reverse charge call but couldn't. I asked Sean about reverse charge calls and he said they couldn't be made on board, but explained how I could buy phone cards. But I decided to wait until King's Cross to phone my parents as I wanted to save my money. But I did appreciate his helpfulness. After Peterborough, um, I went to the toilet, leaving my ticket on the seat back table, and asked the gentleman next to me who boarded the train at Peterborough if he would let the guard inspect my ticket. By now, my luggage was moved out of the way for the passenger next to me. While I was in the washroom, Sean knocked on the door and asked for tickets, and I just said that I was in seat C11 and that I'd left the ticket on my table for him. And he said that was fine, and that was my last interaction with him. I wasn't in any trouble or distress that morning, but if I had been, everything he did would have made it easier for me to approach him. And I'm sure that he'll have helped a lot of passengers who really were in trouble over the years. Whilst I wasn't as vulnerable as I looked that morning, I would say, as an autistic trans woman of colour, I am a vulnerable person who has been subjected to a lot of discrimination and abuse throughout my life, though I have more support and acceptance than I used to. But back then, very few people treated me with humanity, and this was one of the very few occasions somebody did. I'm 40 now and still think of that day all these years later. It's worrying to think the government want to axe the jobs of people like Sean who look out for people who may be vulnerable. And I think the public need to be reminded of this, and that people who have been helped by trained guards appreciate and remember the help they've received even over 20 years later. I also think Sean should know that his help was and still is very much appreciated.